do it.
Hey, Uncle Mark.
Yes.
Here's the thing. When Uncle Doug and I went to Manti together a few weeks back, and
I believe it's pronounced Manti.
Manti. Mm-hmm. We spoke with a guy who was a biblical. He had a Bible museum, and he had all these artifacts and whatever.
Yeah,
I believe that's called a biblical jagoff. But yes, it was a biblical jagoff.
They were exactly artifacts. They were artifact adjacent, I suppose.
Some of them were artifacts in the sense that they were 300 whole years old.
Right.
They were facsimile facts.
Yes, artifact similes, I think was the portmanteau that you were looking for. Yes. Anyway, Douglas, you got into a bit of a argument.
Well, we tried to avoid it, like we mentioned before. But, it's just, he was just laying out things for us to pick up that became very hard not to.
He kept dropping that low-hanging fruit.
Exactly.
We're three people that will take bait at some point when it's dangled so tantalizingly in front of our eyes.
I thought I was going to be so good, and I was like, Doug, no. I'm giving him. I'm waving him off. I'm like, don't buzz the tower. And then I said it. I think I was the first one who actually engaged on something, but I was just trying to give him a little jab and then go. It was like a little poke and go. But no, Doug needed to dive in.
Once you open those floodgates. Yeah,
and he had a big gun to bring out.
Right. We ended up on somehow we got to the subject of the biblical inerrancy. Basically, he was saying he could prove the Bible was 100% true textually.
Right.
Right, with evidence and so we got into that place and we were talking about how the timelines of the Gospels don't match up, and the events that happen to them don't match up.
Do too.
That was kind of his response. Yeah, they do.
His big counter argument was nuh-uh.
Exactly, and we were trying to talk about how the writers of the Gospels were not eyewitnesses to the events they wrote about, and he brought up Josephus, which
who is my favorite blues guitarist.
Exactly.
Is that the one we're talking about today?
Yes,
could be.
Okay, great.
I mean, we have no evidence that he wasn't.
Who also did not meet Jesus.
Right, exactly. I was taken aback because it is such a lousy apologetic. I'm surprised people still run to it. But he went right there, and he did it with such reverence and finality. It was kind of like, look, man, here it is, Josephus. Now get out.
Right.
So, and then he dropped his quill.
That's right. Yeah. It's like most apologetics, its popularity is matched only by its flimsiness. So I thought we could dive into why Titus Flavius Josephus is not the catching of the golden snitch that Christians think he is. So
I don't know what that means, but let's...
Yes, you do.
Let's continue.
You've read all of the Harry Potters like 17 times.
I never did.
You saw the movies.
I kind of paid attention. Anyway, let's go.
So Josephus was born Yosef ben Metityahu around 37 CE in Jerusalem.
I wish they would go to the Meta Yahoo apologetic rather than Josephus, just because it's funnier.
It's a funnier word. Well. Exactly.
Yeah.
You guys know about the this is true, the Hasidic Jewish rapper named Matisyahu, don't you?
No.
Yeah, that's a real guy.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we'll do him another day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So again, with everything in this period of time, dates are an approximation, but just so we're clear, scholars argue exactly when the year 0 falls in the life of Christ.
Sure.
With some arguing that Jesus was as old as 4. But let's be generous and say that Jesus was born in year 0, as most Christians believe he was.
Crazy bit of luck.
Right, exactly.
But I will also be generous and assume that there was actually a man fitting the description of Jesus.
Right. So if he was born in the year 0, that means he was crucified in the year 33 CE, a full 4 years before Josephus was born. So obviously they never met. But the larger point is...
Says you.
You're right. Yeah, they did.
He came back. Jesus came back. You don't know.
That's right. You did.
Maybe they met in Guatemala. Did I just blow your mind?
Is it Josephus Ha? Is that his name in the book?
The anti-meta Yahoos. Ha's.
So
we're crossing a lot of streams here, guys.
I literally have no idea what we're saying anymore, what we're talking about.
So the larger point about Josephus is that he was born in Jerusalem at the very time that all of the events in the book of Acts were taking place. So the Pentecost, the conversion and ministry of Paul, the martyrdom of the apostles, etc., was happening in and around Jerusalem when Josephus was growing up, right?
Okay.
Great time to be alive.
Right. And the fact that he doesn't mention any of that stuff is somewhat interesting, but we'll just stick to the things that he does mention.
It's not what he was interested in.
That's right.
Those years he was into horticulture.
That's right.
Josephus' family was one of Jerusalem's elite, and Josephus benefited from a good education and his family's many political connections. He actually started out as a Jewish militant fighting the Roman occupation. He fought in the First Jewish-Roman War, and in 67 CE, he surrendered to the soon-to-be Emperor Vespasian, who decided to keep Josephus as a slave and translator. A funny little story about that surrender. Josephus and about 40 of his rebels were cornered by Vespasian and his forces in a cave in Galilee. Josephus proposed they all commit suicide before the Romans could capture them, and all but 2 of them did. One of the 2 that didn't was Josephus.
The guy who suggested it?
Exactly.
That's awesome.
What an asshole.
What an asshole.
Okay, everybody on 3. 1, 2. Yeah.
And then it's all that's left is just him and one guy going, wait, were we going on 3 or 1, 2, 3, go?
Then kill. Yeah. Oh, well, let's surrender. So while in captivity, Josephus claimed to have had a vision that Vespasian would become emperor, which is not a bad way of going about pleasing your captor.
Right.
When Vespasian did ascend to the throne a few years later.
Highly motivated prophecy, that.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
When Vespasian did become emperor, he granted Josephus his freedom. It was at that time that he changed his name, defected to the Roman cause entirely, and was granted citizenship.
Ooh.
And yes, he was most definitely considered a traitor by the Jews at the time, and many even now.
Sure.
Because
he
was a traitor. Absolutely.
Only because of his treachery, though.
Just because of his treachery, which I don't think is fair.
Come on, guys. Let's look at both sides of the issue.
Look, if American 2019 has taught us anything, a little treachery between friends. Hey, come on.
What's a couple minutes in an otherwise perfect life?
Right.
With Vespasian now emperor, it fell to his son Titus to quell the rebellious Jews, and Titus employed Josephus as his translator, historian, and advisor.
Yeah.
So this rare position as a member of both the Jewish and Roman aristocracy is why Josephus had basically front row seats for pretty much every major event in Palestine in the second half of the 1st century CE. So it was kind of an amazing confluence of events that makes Josephus's histories very important.
Yes.
Right. So
yeah, he traded up, and who's to blame him? Like,
right.
he was an upwardly mobile guy.
Yeah. He went on to write several works that survive in whole or in part today, most famously The Jewish War and the Antiquities of the Jews, which chronicle the political and military goings-on of the Jews, written from the Jewish perspective, but obviously for a Gentile audience. So these 2 works are very important to scholars of this period of time. I'm just on a quick side note, Josephus, I think we already established this, was a bit of a dick.
Right.
Aside from betraying his people, he was a real shitbag to his enemies and used his status to exact revenge on his critics and enemies, some serious and some petty. He divorced 3 wives before sticking with his 4th, and although he never practiced it, he was a proponent of polygamy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, why not? So, let's get to the heat of the meat. As a historian of the 1st century Jewish politics in and around Palestine, yeah.
Palestine. You say it however you want to.
Right. It's my segment. Josephus mentions Pontius Pilate, Herod the Great, and several other historical characters and political groups that appear in the Bible.
Confirming
Therefore,
that those
everything
ones,
he says is true.
Right, exactly.
Those ones existed.
Here's the thing. Those people existed, exactly. And you would therefore expect a historian at that time to reference them. This proves nothing about the actual truth of the Bible any more than the fact that Bill Clinton appears in the movie Contact proves that that's a true story.
Right.
So he does mention John the Baptist in Antiquities of the Jews, which is interesting. It's the only mention of John the Baptist outside of the Gospels, and it is believed to be authentic by scholars. So the reference that Josephus puts in this book is to a Jewish legend that Herod lost his army because he had killed John that was called the Baptist. So there was at least a legend about a guy named John the Baptist in 1st century Palestine. However, this presents another problem because Josephus dates John's death to 36 CE, which is at least some years after the death of Jesus, and all four Gospels have John the Baptist dying before Jesus.
Right.
So even that little thing.
But right. And it is a fact that when their mothers met, the fetuses leapt inside their tummies. So, I mean, I don't know how he got that wrong, because that's true Bible fact.
Yes, indeed. That is true. I also want to say that the legend of John, he did not plant all those apple seeds. I don't care. Apple trees. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, though they were fig trees.
It was just a legend.
Johnny Fig Seed. It's the Jewish version, and of course, the white man stole it, right? Made it apples because that's the thing. So, yeah.
Okay, so let's get to the mentions of Jesus by Josephus. The first mention is in Book 18, Chapter 3, Verse 3. It's not long, but it's a little bit lengthy. I'm going to read it, so bear with me. And this is quoting Josephus. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works. A teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again on the third day, as the divine prophets had foretold these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him, and the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day. That's pretty
definitive.
That's pretty definitive. I mean, Josephus names Jesus.
I'm sold. I'm a Christian again.
Yeah, well, there's just one problem.
Damn it.
This was a total forgery.
What?
This is a total forgery and interpolation. It's such a fulsome quotation about Jesus that it's come to be known as the testimony of Flavianum. But it's a total fake. It was dropped in
meaning it was added to Josephus's work.
Exactly. By zealous Christians probably in the 4th century.
Yeah.
So
it does feel like complete, like it needs no context. It's just whole and complete unto itself, just rammed into the middle of something.
It manages to get some anti-Semitism in there. And if you read just the few verses before and after, it sounds totally off, right?
The language is different.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been proven to be, yeah.
It's not even authentically Josephus, which is specious anyway.
Exactly.
If it was authentically.
So, how dare you, sir?
Specious Josephus, say that 3 times. And Whackin' Yahoo appears in the mirror and raps at you. So my question is, like, what motivation does he have? What motivation does a former Jew turned, I guess, pagan Roman courtier to the emperor? What motivation does he have to say that Jesus was the Christ, right?
None. I mean, and that's one of the big glaring things in there is, like, why would he say he was the Christ?
Right.
Like, that's just saying, like, Joseph Smith was the prophet.
Right. How does it serve his master, which is clearly what this guy was all about.
Right, exactly.
Well, and even
it doesn't seem to serve Rome at all, does it?
And even if he believed that Jesus was the Christ and decided that he wanted, he wouldn't have put it in just because his master would have killed him for it.
And,
the Romans, I know the Jews killed Christ. I know all our Nazi listeners, that's what happened. But they were Roman nails and a Roman cross and a Roman hammer. So
exactly.
It was the Romans.
Exactly. And so it's been proven with software and computer analysis that this was pretty much lifted out of the book of Luke and dropped into this text, right? So one thing we know for sure is it is corrupted information. It is inadmissible in any kind of court, right? So only 2 mentions. One of them is a forgery. Here's the second one. Same book, book 20, chapter 9, verse 1. It's in the context of a larger discussion about some political goings-on. He says, quote, Festus was now dead, and Albinus was but upon the road, so he assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James, and some others. That's it, right?
So we got his brother.
We get his brother. And it's in passing, and it's in the context of a book that's like 400 pages long as well, right? So
that's the only other mention in Josephus?
That's it.
Oh my God.
And that one was not probably a forgery, but
no, this one seemed to be authentic.
So what he's saying is he's trying to identify a person, and he says this person was next to the brother of the guy that some people called Christ.
Exactly. And one thing it does prove is that Jesus had brothers. So suck on that, Catholics.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the other thing is that, like, this I know is the passage that is used by many people who study ancient history to say, yes, there was a physical man, a real human named Jesus who was a prophet and claimed to be the Christ.
Right.
So that's a possibility. I mean, it's compelling evidence that there may have been a historic Jesus for the historicity of
Bearing in mind, though, that this was Josephus wrote this book about 30 years after Jesus had existed.
Sure.
If he existed.
Right.
So,
Right.
there
In
is...
the same way that there's literally no evidence that John the Baptist existed outside of the Bible and
Right.
this one mention by Josephus, right? So Jesus is just
of a legend of a guy.
But here's
ephemeral, a legend
Yeah.
of a guy. Now, this is the brother of a legend of a guy.
Right, exactly.
So
And that's the only mention.
check and mate.
Right? So here's the thing. Nobody is arguing that Christianity doesn't exist or that it didn't have a beginning.
Right.
Right? Even if this
Right.
one reference in Josephus's voluminous body of work is in fact referencing the Jesus that early Christianity based itself on, all of your work is still in front of you, Christians.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. You've gained zero ground.
Yeah, no one disputes that in the Middle East, in the 1st century CE, there grew a legend about a preacher with healing powers that was eventually crucified by the Romans, came back from the dead, and left the earth. The fact that a historian at that time mentions that legend is not proof of anything except the existence of that legend.
Right.
Which no one is arguing against
Right.
in the first place. Right?
At least with Bigfoot, we have some big plaster casts of giant footprints.
Exactly.
That's more true.
If some
Right.
future historian of this time period references the Avengers as some kind of cultural phenomenon, that doesn't mean the Avengers were real. Right?
But what if it mentions Tony Stark's brother? Because I think that then
Where's his movie?
you have to
Albert.
think about it.
Albert Stark.
You got
Albert Stark,
Just think about
who
it.
works
for
at
a
the
minute.
muffler shop.
That's right. And he's not very good.
So all of the other stuff in the Bible, the cleansing of the temple, the
He's
walking
okay.
in
He's
water,
okay.
the feeding of the multitudes, the healing of the sick, none of that is bolstered by Josephus' mentioning Jesus' name one time.
Right.
So at the end of the day, Josephus was a traitor and a shitbag, not exactly the character you want vouching for your faith. He references Jesus twice in hundreds and hundreds of pages of minutia. One of those mentions is an obvious forgery, and the other is a passing reference to his name only. So what have
to
we
his
proved
brother,
here?
actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What have we proved here? Nothing.
Right.
In fact, if Christianity was taking that region by storm, as Christian legend would have you believe, the fact that it only appears one time in Josephus's text is actually proof that that legend is weak.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
again, this is not a foundation upon which one should build your house.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Well, I mean, look, there are plenty of apologetics out there. Some are stronger than others. But yes, if someone says the word Josephus to you, you now have permission to giggle a little.
Have at 'em.
Yeah, and this is the primary source material, right? They all go back to, well, as if you read Josephus.
Yes, with such intensity.
Because none of
right.
the other contemporaneous writers, like there are other people who
Yes.
wrote contemporaneously of the history, none of them mention Jesus. Like
Exactly.
nobody's talking about it. So like the one guy who says something about it, and it's like basically what he says is, it sounds like, and then David Koresh's brother, who called himself Christ, it's
Yeah.
like, that's very clearly a toss-off. That's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the very important Mr., Pope
At-
Pius the Third or
Yes.
whatever. It is definitely just a throwaway.
And the Romans, who wrote down everything
Yes.
in a language that has never been lost, right?
Right.
A language that has been legible without any gap in time, even though it is very hard to conjugate verbs. I'll give it that. Never wrote a thing down about it. It especially here, this stupid, on the Passover, we traditionally let one random criminal go. Which
Right,
never
right,
happened,
right.
right? Their big special, let a criminal go out of jail free one day. You think they would have written that down? No.
Yeah.
Wadwick. Let Wadwick go.
Wadwick. So there it is.
Next
There's
time we'll discuss Wadwick.
Yeah, Wadwick.
All right. Well, thanks, Uncle Doug, for clearing that up. I feel enlightened. Let's move along.
I'm convinced. Let's move on.